Well, good morning. Well, it is good morning. It's actually 25 past 8 on today's a Wednesday. Right, anyway, I put up that video, as you know, which related to why I stopped going to the Kingdom Hall, why I left the witnesses. And I said I had other stuff I wanted to put up. As you're aware, if you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness, when you leave the witnesses, it's hard to talk about your experience to other people because, of course, you can't talk to witnesses because they won't talk to you. And people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses don't understand. They can't understand. And even if you try to explain to them things that happened, they'd say, "So these elder guys, who are they?" And you go, "Well, they're just, they're just blokes, window cleaners and stuff," and they'll be shaking. Then so you let a window cleaner talk to you that way, and you go, "Yes, I did," because that's the way the arrangement was. So what I'm going to talk today about is Jehovah's Witnesses, music, and me, because for a large part of my life, Jehovah's Witnesses and music were integral to what I am all about, as it were, and they frequently didn't get on, and me especially. So the three of us, that combo, Jehovah's Witnesses, music and me, that combination didn't work. And what it led to happening to me over something just silly about music was extraordinary. Now, I think I may be unique in all the Jehovah's Witness story that this particular thing happened in relation to music. I don't think what happened to me is typical, because near enough what I've read since, it is atypical. It's what normally happens when there's confrontation and the way elders deal with things. It's just the way they deal with this. And it's a warning that I should have given out a long time ago, because I didn't have the portal of YouTube to say, "Oh, by the way, this is probably the way this is going to be handled, and whatever you do not listen to their advice." But anyway, I will just crack on with the story to, I don't know how long this is going to take, and this is the shortened version. This is the shortened version of this story. I'd love to be able to start off with growing up in the 60s, because I'm a 60s child, born in 62, listened to pirate radio, Radio Caroline, listened to all these songs that my mum had, and how that influenced me and all that jogging. But we'll just have to completely dispense with that because it's not really integral to the story. So we'll just zoom ahead. We'll zoom ahead to a pivotal year of 1980. 1980 was pivotal in the fact that I got baptised in that year, and it's also the year that I met the two men who would affect me, musically speaking. Musically, that's all. That's all the connection was. Two men who affected me. So the first guy was a guy called Timothy Donaldson, and he was in Runcorn Congregation. And I used to see him at circuit assemblies, which we used to have in Manchester Assembly Hall. And he was one of these brothers that when talks would be given, it'd last maybe half an hour, and then he was off. And he used to be in the foyer. And when he used to go to the toilet or whatever it was, he was always there chatting to his mates, chatting to his little mates, his little gang he had, and different girls. And I was thinking, aye, he's one of those bad association brothers, even though his dad was an elder. He's one of these brothers that you don't want anything to do with. He dressed it a bit weird, and his hair was a bit longer than it should have been for a Jehovah's Witness. But I had nothing to do with him, and by a quirk of complete fate, I don't even go to the details, I ended up writing to him and developing a relationship that we wrote to each other. And I was only, just come. I wasn't quite 18 yet, I was still 17, and I was ripe to be influenced by the right person at this time, who was going to take me along here, and show me the error of my musical ways, which at that point was just really liking ELO and the Beatles and the Police, amongst other stuff. he was going to show me the error of my way. So what he did, so I went up to his house in Runcorn, and he had, it was really odd because he just had bare floorboards and all his rooms were painted black. And he used to dress by wearing this long, all his clothes came out of a charity shop. They all came out of a charity shop. Well, I think they did. Well, certainly looked like they came out of a charity shop anyway. So I went to his house in a vast record collection. And you wouldn't find any ELO, the Police, or the Beatles, or Blondie, or the Boomtown Rats in this record collection. It was full of something called post-punk music, alternative music, or new wave music. You know, dress it up whichever way you want to. It was full of bands I've never heard of before in my life, like called it Swell Maps, A Certain Ratio. Joy Division I had heard purely because of connection with his ex-girlfriend who played me a song called Transmission. The Slits, Killing Joke, just records and you know, basically it was all independent music, which I never heard of these bands because they never ever entered the charts. Never entered the charts, not a chance. But you know, it was like some secret music I didn't even know existed, and there it was the physical proof that it did exist because there were all the records. So the way he influenced me, he got me to look at different music. And the next thing he influenced me, he says, you know what? We should form a band. How many times has this happened? We should form a band. And you can be the bass player, because he was already a guitarist. He had a Vox AC30 amplifier, because that was the same amplifier that Bernard Albrecht out of Joy Division had, and he had a guitar, not particularly good guitar, and an acoustic guitar. He says, we should form a band. And because I was right for the picking and highly influential at that time, because I was just turned 17, 18, that's what we did eventually. He got me over to Frank Hesse's record music shop in Liverpool, famous music shop where John Lennon got his first record, where I think George Harrison's auntie bought him his first guitar. George Harrison's auntie, I think, bought George's first guitar from Frank Hesse's famous Liverpool shop, which sadly, is no longer there. Frank Hesse's is gone. It's history. If you want to Google Frank Hesse's music shop, it's fantastic. Anyway, that's gone. So we went there, and didn't know what I was doing. How did I even know I could even play a bass or even play a guitar? So we went in, and he says, right, that's the guitar for you. So I bought something called a bass by an Ibanez Blazer bass. And needless to say, we then cracked on with the spirit of becoming this great independent band in the mould of all the artists he liked. During the same period, I came up to do pre-convention work in Edinburgh, and in Edinburgh, doing pre-convention work, all the brothers used to play football, and I was wearing my police t-shirt because I'd seen the police in 1979, the Deeside Leisure Centre of all places. This guy came up to me and says, oh, I like the police, you like the police? Yes, I do like the police, that's why I'm wearing this police t-shirt. And next thing is we got to associate with these guys, and these guys were from Ayr, and we all went swimming that night, and afterwards we were in the pub having the one pint that you used to have because you were a good brother, and we're having the one pint, and I got chatting to this guy called Ian Gill. Through Ian Gill we realised we both liked the same sort of music, ELO and the Beatles, and he liked Queen, but we won't go into that. But he didn't know anything about all the alternative bands like at the time, like Swell Maps, Simple Minds, Joy Division. He never heard of these, so intrigued. So we developed a friendship, even though I went back to England. We back in those days, of course, no internet, no mobile phone, so we used to write to each other. I used to write to Ian used to write to me, I wrote to his wife, I was invited to the wedding but never went, blah blah blah. But needless to say, there was a to and froing, so I used to come up to Ayr, and he used to come down to Orbit. Now in the meantime, me and Timothy were cracked on with trying to conquer the music world, and we did a load of songs, but eventually I got a girlfriend, and he didn't like it because I wasn't giving him his full attention, and needless to say, he took the huff, his toys went out the pram, and we split up as you do. But what he had done is he'd introduced me to people from Wallasey, Runcorn and Liverpool. People, even though we were close to where I lived in Ellesmere Port, they were like other brothers and sisters that I never knew, because they were in a different circuit to me, the ones in Wallasey and Liverpool, even though they were just up the road. A bit bizarre the way they all worked out. And the thing is, they were just like him, and I became like them. In other words, we all went to the charity shop, and we wore a long mac, and we wore hats and long scarves and fingerless gloves, black shirts, black ties, thin trousers, and you all like to get into the things of writing somber poetry, even though we were Jehovah's Witnesses and we have this lovely hope of the resurrection and paradise. For some bizarre reason, when you're 18 and you haven't got a girlfriend or you haven't got a boyfriend and blah 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 blah, you sort of get inspired to write sort of these solemn melancholy words, which we used to do. We used to send each other poetry. We wrote a bit of poetry we wrote. Of course, me and him then said, oh, we're in a band and people like that, and we took a lot of black and white photographs. We took a lot of black and white photographs, which I've got a lot of his, he's got some of mine, I've got other people's, I've still got them today, a lot of black and white photographs. Well, basically, you're wearing a long back, it's taken outdoors, and you're just doing this sort of thing. So in other words, you're like band shots, you know, where you see shots of bands where they're all trying to look, you know, like, you know, quite interesting. Looking out in the distance, well that we're doing, we were wearing the mats and the hats and the gloves and the thing, you know, whatever it is. So we looked, there was sort of band post photographs with all these people who couldn't play a musical instrument, but it looked fantastic. So we all thought it was part of this sort of gang. We all liked this music that nobody else liked, and we all dressed this way, and it was accepted. It was, you know, it was great. So what happened is that in the interim, in 1982, I believe this was, there was a talk at the district conventions. I went up to Scotland. I started now going to the district conventions in Scotland because they were a different week as my own down in England. I went up and there was a talk called Music That Debases. Now, if you weren't young, you may have been young, you might have been at the assemblies in 82, but if you weren't like 15 onwards, this probably means nothing to you. And if you weren't going to the meetings in 92, this absolutely means nothing to you. But anyway, the crux of this is that the organisation was trying to advise us that worldly music, so in other words, any music produced by somebody who isn't a Jehovah's Witness, which, you know, when you go to, back then when you went to these things called record stores, that you didn't have a section, you know, you didn't go through the J's Jehovah's Witness section, and they're all the records produced by the society, all the witnesses just went straight to the Jehovah's Witnesses, you know, just behind, you know, artists beginning with J, like Joy Division. So anyway, so yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses, Joy Division, oh, back to Jehovah's Witnesses, yes, I'll buy this album. That didn't actually happen. So in other words, all the music that we owned at that time was worldly music. Now what the society was saying is that a lot of the worldly music that their brothers had was music that debased. In other words, it was music which was incompatible with the teachings of Jehovah. It's contrary to what we should be doing. So in other words, there was a lot of music which maybe promote sexual things or violence or negative things. You get the drift. You know what's happening here, because the same thing was rolled out about anything else in life, basically. If it was a contradiction what Jehovah's Witnesses was teaching at the time, it was clearly wrong. So music that debases. And the crux of what they were saying was this, is that most recording artists, especially from probably 67 onwards, used to smoke, take drugs. A lot of them smoke marijuana. And what happened is, and this is why Jehovah's Witnesses don't like you taking drugs, is that when you take drugs, it's because you're opening your mind. And of course, Satan and his demons, they're ready to pounce. They're just waiting around in the spirit realm, waiting for people to get high. And the moment they get high, they enter the brain, because all of a sudden they're freeing their mind. Funny thing is, the same things happen every night to all of us when we dream. Bizarre, isn't it? You know, sorry brothers, you're no longer allowed to dream because you're emptying your mind and all sorts of thoughts come in, and some of the dreams you know you have are massively weird, and you think next day, where did that come from? Well, it's obviously Satan and the demons. But anyway, we digress there. So anyway, so the crux of what they're saying is that basically, if your favourite band or recording artist was known to take drugs, that meant that when Satan and his demons entered his freed mind this time, while he was smoking a joint and just trying to write down the lyrics of a song, smoking one big spliff, trying to write down the lyrics of a song, at that point, those lyrics would then be completely inspired by what Satan and the demons were trying to tell him. This is true, I kid you not, this is what they believed. So basically everybody sitting at that assembly was thinking, hold on a second, do the bands I like, have they ever been known to take drugs? Well, certainly if you're a fan of the Beatles, that's probably every album from Revolver onwards. You know, all of them, because at that point, 65, well, Revolver came in 66, from Rubber Soul onwards, I think Bob Dylan introduced the Beatles to Taking Marijuana in 65, so then onwards, the Beatles, when they were writing their songs, were taking drugs, LSD in 67, Sgt. Pepper, you get the drift. And so everybody had to think, oh no, the music I like probably is not what Jehovah wants me to listen to, because the society, Jehovah's talking through the society, and the society is important, telling us this, and as we're so close to near the end of the system of things, I don't want to die at Armageddon with all the millions of others just because I decided to keep an album by Led Zepp. I'd hate the fact that Stairway to Heaven was on the turntable when Armageddon would come, because clearly I was going to get killed because of the backwards track that allegedly is in there. So what happened was there was a notice board at the convention underneath the concourse. It was internally iBox, and people would put on the notice board things like, Mum, I'm in row 33, seats 4 and 5, I've saved you seats 7 and 8. Or, Dad, find me in the car park, I'm parked in car park G. But as soon as the music, the bassist talk had ended, people were putting up here, young rebellious brothers were putting up, if the society thinks I'm getting rid of my Pink Floyd records, they've got another thing coming. So, a lot of brothers, including me, because I was so gullible back in those days, took this to heart, really took this to heart. Now, the brothers I was starting associated with at the time, which was Ian Gill, and Dino Facchini, and Jim Kelly, and Paul Gentini, and others in Air, took this to heart. And in the spirit of what had happened in the Christian Greek scriptures, whereupon I think a couple of guys had become Christians, and they owned a lot of really expensive books, but I think they might have been spiritistic books. I don't remember the story because it's been a while since I've been back to the Bible. So they owned a lot of spiritistic books, and in the spirit of what they could have done is, I think they could have sold the books. That's what it is. They could have sold the books and got a small fortune, but because they realised what was in these books was spiritistic or whatever it was, they burnt them. They burned them to show how good they were. They could have, nobody could have heard the story, but they decided to burn them so that nobody else would be influenced by these the bad writings. So the brothers in Air got all their records together, all of them. That's every worldly record, that's everybody apart from the Kingdom Melody tapes, which you could buy at that time. Oh, what joy. So they got all their records together. You imagine the lot of them went, because they were all worldly records. And they went down to a beach, I think it was Croy Bay. They went down and they had a public bonfire. They were the only ones on the beach because they did it at night. And they burnt the lot. And they added up how much the wealth was of these women, how much they were worth, and it was worth thousands of pounds. And they thought they were doing the right thing because Jehovah, through the society, music that debases, influence you don't realise it, you need to get rid of it. So they were following, instead of they didn't want to sell the records so that those bad Beatles could influence anybody else, or Pink Floyd or Genesis or whoever it was. They burnt them, and they felt brilliant. They felt they were super spiritual and they'd done the right thing. Unfortunately, the elders didn't agree. They thought that potentially, if it had got out what they'd done, if the press had got hold of it, it would have been the local paper, burning of Jehovah's Witnesses. They thought because it was public, even though that's what happened in the first century, they thought because it was public that they were drawing attention to themselves, and if they wanted to get rid of their records, they should have just thrown them in the bin quietly, all of them individually, if they didn't want to sell them. And they got taken into something called the Wee Room in Air Congregation, and they just got basically tore a new arsehole by a couple of arseholes. So anyway, that's what happened, and Dino wrote to me telling me how the great thing that happened, and then the next letter was, what have we done? And they were thinking to themselves, what have we done? We've just sold all our records, never got a penny for them, when they were worth loads of money. So they could have actually gone to, a second-hand record shop, which they had a lot in those days, says, how much will you give me for these? Which is what I did, because when I came back, I just thought, I looked at my record collection, and I didn't have I didn't have any Pink Floyd or Genesis or whatever, but I had a few Beatles. I had a song by the Beatles called, it was at the EP, Magical Mystery Tour, 1967 it was released, I believe. Or was it 68? No, 67, just after Sgt. Pepper. And it was mint. It was mint. It was the original one from 67. The vinyl was mint. And if you know what mint, when it comes to grading records, it looked like it had never been played. No scratches, nothing, it was beautiful. The whole thing was beautiful, and I remember I said to my mum, I know this record here was directly influenced by drugs. No doubt about it, because Lennon and co were taking LSD at the time. That's the EP which has I in the Walrus on it, you get my drift. And so I ripped it to pieces, and literally ripped, it's sacrilege now, it is complete sacrilege, but I got hold of the Beatles EP and I ripped it to pieces, I threw it in the bin. And then I took the majority of my music collection, I went down to our local record store, which is a second record store, and I traded them in, and I got maybe about £1 for every album. Lost out big style, but at least I didn't burn them, so I got the money. So, what happened the next stage? I move up to air. In this atmosphere of what's just happened. I move up to air, and none of the brothers have got any records. They've all gone. They've got no music whatsoever. There's nothing to fill that gap which you have when you're in your early 20s and you'd like to listen to some music, because they'd burnt a lot of them. The lot of them had gone. Oh my goodness, so they'd all gone, so they went up there, and we were going to fill that vacuum, because I played, at the time I was making up my own songs using 2 tape cassettes, and then in a nutshell I used to overdub myself, so I put down drums and guitar, record it, put them onto a tape deck, play it, press record on the other thing, then put over the bass or the lead or the vocal or the keyboards or whatever it is. And I started sending up these tapes up to these guys in there, and they're going, wow, you've got to come to air, we'll form a band. And because of the demise of my previous band with me and Tim and the Dr. Rhythm drum machine, Dino was a drummer. The opportunity, if you've ever played, if you've ever done this, to go from a drum machine to playing with a drummer, you couldn't miss out. The problem was he didn't have any drums, but anyway, we'll come back to that. So I move up to air into this sort of atmosphere, the fact that none of the brothers got any music whatsoever at all, because they burnt them all. They've all gone in and up in smoke. So we come in, and I said, right, okay, and I started writing songs. And Ian Gill had already written a load of songs, so he says, let's get these done, let's get these done, we'll put them on a cassette and we'll hand them out to the young brothers, and that can replace the worldly music, because at least our music wasn't worldly. It was modern, but it wasn't worldly. So a lot of people disagreed with this. So anyway, we started doing this, and we started doing these things, making music, and in the meantime Dino started every week to buy a piece of musical equipment, and eventually he had managed to assemble, through acquiring different musical equipment every single week out of his wages, he assembled a drum kit, really did assemble a drum kit, and then we started to then rehearse in the community hall. We started to rehearse in this community hall thing. It was a school hall, up in the school hall, the 3 of us, Ian Gill, me playing the bass, Ian playing the guitar, Dino playing the drums, and we called ourselves Always the Way. Now Dino, who was, who was sort of quite a spiritual guy at the time, he used to tell people, the reason why we're called Always the Way is because in the 1st century the Christians never called themselves Christians, they referred to themselves as being in the way. So we're always the way. Well, you get the way he was thinking, but when I came up with the name of the band, that was the furthest thing from my mind, to be honest with you. So anyway, we're practicing on every Friday night in this school hall, thinking, yeah, we'll get good, and then we can go out and maybe play a pub or two, and then we're recording these songs on cassette. Then we had enough songs to fill a C60. If you don't know what cassettes are, you don't know what a C60 is, but C60 is an album and more's worth. A C60 is an hour-long tape. So we had this C60. So we weren't just going to give, you know, the C60 out to all the young brothers. We wanted to put a cover, and because our songs mostly dealt with I can't get a girlfriend, you know, typical thing of guys in the 20s. And where is my true love? When am I going to find my true love? And songs about the kingdom. Songs like a song I wrote called, funny enough, The New System. Another song called I Don't Want to Die, because I really don't want to die at Armageddon. All three of us at the time, me, Dino and Ian, all pioneered. And those two were ministerial servants. I wasn't, because I just moved in the congregation, and I was that lofty title would be applied to me at a later date. So anyway, that's three pioneers, two servants in the congregation, in a band, producing their own music, because all the brothers had got rid of their own music. We did a cassette, and the cassette cover, the inlay we put on the cassette cover was a picture of, I believe, it might have been the Cedar Point, Ohio convention, I don't know what it was, and it might have been the Advertise, Seek God is King. I think it was that one. Basically, it was a black and white photograph which showed the stage, and it was the backs of a load of brothers' heads, and sisters' heads, and somebody's taking a picture, and you can see the stage. You can't tell anybody, you couldn't tell who anybody was this on. We thought, this is brilliant. It's a spiritual picture with a spiritual music, and we put it out there, and we just wanted to conquer the world. We wanted to conquer the world, basically, with our spiritual message, because we were spiritual brothers. Around about that time, I was in the Kingdom Hall, and this was a foretaste of what was to happen. I was in the Kingdom Hall, and they had a piano. They used to have pianos in Kingdom Halls back in the day. There was an old piano in our Kingdom Hall, and I hadn't really played the piano. It was wonderful. Or a piano, and it's in tune, because sometimes you used to have brothers who used to play the kingdom melodies by the piano. You know, brothers who, you know, suggest to the music, fantastic, how can you read music? Fantastic. So I'm belting on, trying to get some rudimentary chords. And, you know, it's very melodic, very nice. And this older sister comes up to me and says, what's that you're playing there, son? I says, it's a song, I've just literally come up with it now. I'm going to probably write some lyrics referring to the truth. And she looked at me and said, oh son, you can't do that. And I went, why not? Because Jehovah's organisation, you may be putting something in there in your lyrics which is contrary to Jehovah's organisation, and you may influence the brothers the wrong way. You know, that'd be just like something that the world would do. I'm thinking, how odd to actually come up with that assumption. Aha! She wasn't the only one thinking that. Because of course the tape got round the congregation, this tape with the brothers, and next thing is the elders got to hear the fact there was this tape in circulation of this, you know, modern music, you know, written by brothers, and the fact that these same brothers on a Friday night were rehearsing in the community hall. They had to do something about it, so we got called into the wee room. So in we go, two elders. Funny enough, I can't now think who those two elders were. Ian and Dino might remember, but it evades me completely. So we're sitting there, and basically the meeting went something like this. Why were we trying to bring attention to ourselves by doing this? What were our intentions in producing this band? And we came back with, says, well, we're trying to fill the void of, you know, we're not supposed to listen to worldly music. Our songs, a lot of them are inspired by being a Jehovah's Witness, and we're hoping that if we become popular, that we can then witness on a massive scale to all young people our age, so that we can impart to them through our music the good news of the King and his kingdom. That's what we wanted to do. But they didn't like that. No, but you're saying they were saying to us, but you're just like the world. How would you just like the world? Well, that's what they want to do. The world want to draw attention to themselves. Well, no, actually, we want to draw attention to the truth. No, it's to yourselves first. And that's what they didn't like, the fact that we were trying to do, instead of trying to do the witness work by chapping doors, we were trying to take a populist way of doing it through the music, which they totally didn't get and didn't agree. And they were just saying that, you know, again, that we could influence some of the young brothers by maybe slipping something into the lyrics which was contrary to what the witnesses believed, and we could have an adverse effect. And that, yet again, everybody in the hall was talking about the band. And in other words, they were just saying, you know, we prefer if you stopped it completely. Just stop it. Just stop it. And also, a lot of the brothers have been offended at the fact that we'd used a photocopy from the Watchtower, and that was offensive as well. So basically everything we did was offensive, writing songs, writing lyrics, performing, the tape, the cover, you name it, it was all offensive, it was all contrary to what would Jehovah want in this? So, needless to say, we walked out of that meeting, I always thought, I don't know about that one, you know, what's supposed to fill the void? None of us have got any records anymore. And Dino, being Dino, he walked out the band and says, that's it, I've quit the band. And subsequently, within a week, all the drum equipment that he'd painstakingly saved up out of his wages to buy, he went and sold a lot. That was the end of Always the Way. We'd achieved the giddy heights of getting 2 of our songs played on West Sound by Gary Marshall in 1984. And then I sent in a note. I continued to do my music, because what else am I going to do? The band's folded, so I continued to do my own songs, sent them to Gary Marshall, and then he played them again, and I changed the name of the band to Call It a Day, ironically, because that's what the elders want us to do. So, that was the end of Always the Way. Very sad, and the opportunity was missed, and how great we could have been. The things we could have achieved as Always the Way, you know, we could only dream about those days when you're single and you're in your 20s, and what we could have done, what we could achieve, and that went. Our dreams died. And if you ever want to, you know, get an idea of what that felt like, I actually wrote a song about that experience in air, and it's called The Thin Veil. And I think there's 2 versions on my channel. There's a live version and a studio version. So if you want to say, okay, you know, what inspired that, The Thin Veil, just play it. Anyway, moving on. So around about that time, I unfortunately lost my digs in air. Unfortunately, I was living with a elder sister who had two people staying with her, a worldly person who was just a tenant in a bedroom, and me another one. And I loved her. I loved where I was. I loved her. I loved, you know, the whole thing. And she said, "Look, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, unfortunately, because my son's having problems with the marriage, and he needs to come and sleep in your bed." So I was made homeless, and I was put up by a few brothers who just said, "My dad's away and my granddad's away." And I went and, you know, I was sofa surfing before sofa surfing had even been invented. That's what I started to do. And he even made an announcement at the Kingdom Hall: "Brother Harrop is looking, is looking for accommodation," because he, you know. So anyway, so that's what happened. So coincidentally, round about this time, I don't know what the link was, but basically me and Dino and Paul Gintini, who wasn't in the band, but he was our close mate, and we were all fed up of what had happened with the elders and the congregation, and we wanted to go somewhere else, and start again. And we were thinking about going remember this phrase, where the need is greater. So we were thinking, let's go somewhere else. I became homeless, and somehow a guy called Jim Wood, not Jim Woods as many people in Rutherglen and Glasgow refer to him, it's Jim Wood. Singular, it's not a plural, it's Jim Wood. So Jim Wood, not Woods, there was a connection made. He was in Rutherglen in Glasgow, and I didn't want to move to Glasgow, because literally when I used to go to Ayr, I used to get the train in and used to go past this thing which is no longer there anymore, thank God they flattened this place. There's a place called Hutchison Town, which was a replacement of the Gorbals, and you went in, it was like they built all this new estate, and it was horrible, it was damp and mouldy, and within a short period of time they were condemned. And the guy who designed it got an award. How ironic is that? So they got condemned, and it was the first thing you saw as you arrived in Glasgow: Hutchison Town, Oh my God, big high rise, it was awful. So I didn't want to move to Glasgow. But I was homeless. I had no choice, and I was fed up with air, and I wasn't going back to Ellesmere Port. That was never happening. So I just thought, here's an adventure. And then of course Dino and Paul said, I tell you what, we'll move with you. And Jim Wood, somehow, he came down to visit us. I don't know if he did a talking or I don't know what it was, but what happened was there was a pioneer flat in Rutherglen above a pub called the Victoria on Formula Road. And funny thing is, for the time I lived in this pioneer flat, I never went into that pub because you didn't. So anyway, what happened was Jim would come to us and said, yes, it's a pioneer flat. One of the pioneers has moved out. He's no longer pioneering. He's gone to a different congregation. Two of the pioneers have moved out because they got married. There's one bloke left, and his name is Andy Doolin. And he's older than you guys, but he's a pioneer like you. I'm sure you'll get on swimmingly. I wish we did. So anyway, we drove up to Glasgow. Andy Doolin, we drove up and it was a close, and he was like 3 floors above this pub. And I just thought, oh no, it was so contrast where I lived. I just come from right on the River Aire, you know, town, the beach, the sea, seagulls, and I was going to live somewhere with a railway line, and it just looked horrible. I had no choice, and they wanted to move, and we just thought, this is the next step in the new venture. So, to cut to the chase, me and Paul moved into the Pioneer flat, to Pioneer, in Rutherglen congregation. Dino was set to join us very shortly afterwards. It took 5 years. So he was supposed to join us shortly afterwards, and it never transpired. And there were separate bedrooms. So I went into one bedroom, used to be a bedroom of David Billingsby, and Paul went into the big bedroom where there were 2 guys. He used to be there, Andy Grice and Gordon Thompson. So I was in Billingsby old bedroom. What a classy sod. He still had half of his clothes. Half of his clothes were still there, so I eventually put them in a black bag, and I think put them all away. And I think they went to a charity shop. So of course, we came up from there, and we were still in the sort of mould of how I dressed in Merseyside, which was fingerless gloves, long mat, hat, when it's sunny you put on the shades, long scarf, black clothes, thin tie. And as soon as I got into the Pioneer flat, I just thought, right, I need to make this a bit homey. So I put up my black and white photographs of me, of my pals, and the only music we had at the time to play was my Always the Way tapes and a few live Joy Division tapes, which I had started to overtape Always the Way music on. So as Always the Way songs grew, the Joy Division live stuff diminished. A New Order. I wish I hadn't have done that, but you can get them online anyway, so that's what happened. So basically Paul came up with no music at all, nothing at all, and I came up with my Always Away collection. That's what we had to do. So what we used to do was, because we moved into Rutherglen, we didn't know anybody, and everybody was so friendly, but we really felt homesick. We massively felt homesick. And to cheer ourselves up what we used to do is we used to go into my room, because he didn't have a music centre. I was the only one who had any way of playing any music. I used to put the cassette in, and we used to turn off the light, and we used to just listen to Always the Way. We used to reminisce about, or remember when I wrote that song, or that song's about that girl, or that song's about that guy there. And we did that several times. Really enjoyed it. And then I got him turned on to, like, you could listen to this Joy Division song here. But Andy Doolin, who was 30, and Paul was about maybe 3 years younger than me, so he must have been maybe about 19. I was 22, I think. And he was about, oh no, I was still 21. I was 21 at this point. No, sorry, I was 22, and I think Paul was 19, and he was 30. So there was a big age gap. Big age gap. You know, when you're 20s to 30s, I know it seems nothing now, but in cultural differences, it was massive. And he didn't like. He took complete offence to what we were doing. And what he used to do was, he used to come in at night. We're sitting there in the dark listening to Always the Way or Joy Division, that's all we had, and he used to just turn on the light in our room. He used to put his hand in the door, turn the light, look at us, and then walk straight out and turn the light off. You know, being a complete twat, to be honest with you. And he did this several times. Door open, light on, looked at us both, light off, shut the door and go. Till the 3rd time he tried this stunt, we took the bulb out the bulb socket. So of course door opens, light on, Switch, flick, 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 door shuts, and me and Paul gutted ourselves. We absolutely gutted ourselves because we'd got one up on Andy. Right, so I think we moved in around about October 84. I hadn't been in Aero that long. I think we moved in March, April, lasted a great summer, tits up. So now in Rutherglen, we're approaching the winter. And it might have been November time. It was just before Christmas, definitely. Now Paul went back to Ayr during the Christmas period. He went back there because, I don't know, it's a bit hard with Jehovah's Witnesses. Although they don't celebrate Christmas, still at Christmas they still all get together and have a big meal on Christmas Day. Bit odd, but there you go. And he went back to see his mum, I think it was. So I was in the Pioneer in the flat alone with Andy Doolin. And the next thing is, I got approached in the Kingdom Hall by one of the elders. One of the elders was a guy called Keith Saunders. And as I've said in the previous tape, he was one of the guys who did district. So pretty big. Oh, this is one of the guys who does talks at the district convention and every circuit assembly. As did Jim Wood as well. So I got approached by the presiding overseer. I don't think it was Keith. The presiding overseer was a portly guy called Stan Bailey. And Stan Bailey used to talk to you, but always used to look in the air. I don't know what it's at, but he could not have eye contact with you. It was really odd, really strange. So he came up to me and was speaking to me, but looking at the ceiling, and said, me and Keith need to come and see you and Paul at the Pioneer flat. I went, right, okay, bit random. And I said, but Paul's away. Oh, that's a shame, that's a shame. Right, we'll go ahead with the talk anyway. Anyway, now see, this is the thing. See, when any elders come and see you, you really should have somebody with you. Somebody else who can give you support. Because when the elders are there, and maybe somebody else that you're not getting on with, you feel ganged up on, and it's completely unfair. There should always be somebody else, impartial. You should say, can I phone a friend? Can I bring a friend to just sit there? So in other words, at the end of it, it won't be what you heard. There'll be somebody else can back you up and say, yes, they did say that, and yes, that was the attitude that I got from those two guys. So needless to say, this is what happened next. So the meetings arranged for one evening. God knows when it was. So two elders come in. The presiding overseer, which was Stan Bailey at the time, and Keith Saunders. Now, to explain, Keith Saunders' protege was Andy Doolin. So it was completely inappropriately the wrong person to be here, because Andy was Keith's boy. Andy previously had been associated younger time with witnesses, fallen away, become an alcoholic, became a violent man. But since then, he come back to the truth. Studied with Keith, I believe. Come back, and now he was the golden boy. He was like the prodigal son returned. He'd come back to the organisation, and he was now a ministerial servant, and he was a pioneer. So, he was Rutherglen's big success story, and he wasn't happy. And this is what he wasn't happy about. So they said, right, Andy, they sat us all down on the couch. You tell Terry here what the problem is. He says, well, Keith, it's the music. I thought, the music? There isn't any music. There's my songs and some Joy Division live stuff. That's it. It's the music, Keith. They like to listen to music with the lights out. Oh my God, not music with the lights out. Like when you actually when you actually close your eyes and listen to music. The lights are out then even though it's day. When you put headphones in your music, you close your eyes and the lights have gone out. There's still lights, but literally you just want to concentrate on the music. So of course he didn't like the fact that we listened to music in the dark. That was wrong. And of course I had adorned around my wall all these black and white pictures of me and my chums when I was living in Ellesmere Port, all my chums from Runcorn and Wallasey. Right. Didn't like that as well. These foreboding, depressive looking pictures, which were just us trying to be a bit arty, to be honest with you. He didn't like the clothes we wore. He didn't like the fact that both me and Paul went around in a long max, the hats, the fingerless gloves, the black shirts, white shirt with a black tie. Didn't like it. And he went through all those points. So it's the music, it's the clothes, it's listening to music in the dark, and it's the pictures on the wall. And he says, Keith, what that sums up to me is that Terry is infatuated, wait for it, with demons. Now, of all the things to be accused of, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, to be accused of being infatuated with demons is probably the worst thing in the world ever. Honestly. You know, you don't be accused of being infatuated with the demons. And there was no reaction by Stan and Keith, and I just thought, hold on a second, he's obviously already told them this. He's already said to these two guys, oh, by the way, it all ends up with infatuated demons. And not at one point, they must have known this, because I looked at their expressions on their faces and there was none. And I just thought, you've already heard this before. And you think it's acceptable for this guy to say this to me. And you hadn't beforehand said to him, oh, hold on, Andy, you can't say that. You really can't say to a brother, a pioneer in the congregation, you're infatuated with demons. That is so over the top and unbalanced and unhinged, and shows that your thinking is not normal. We cannot, under any circumstances, allow you to go and say to this brother, because God knows how he's going to react to this. And they did. So in other words, because he'd spoken to them beforehand, it enabled him, it justified his thought process and his thinking. And he said that to me, and Stan Bailey said to me, so what do you think about that? And I said to him, what could you say? Honestly, what could you say? So I said to him, well, that's typical of someone as self-righteous as Andy. And literally, the word self-righteous had nearly finished my lips when Stan Bailey started like frothing at the mouth, and this sort of angry look came over at Keith Saunders' face, because I had the audacity to actually have to say to the prodigal son that he was self-righteous. I was all wrong. You can call somebody that they're infatuated with Satan and the demons, but to call somebody self-righteous, that's really wrong. You know, and he literally exploded, and he went to me, how dare you say that about a ministerial servant appointed by Jehovah and pioneer in the congregation? How dare you say that? I'm thinking to myself, goodness sake, what? I'm scratching my head thinking, I was like, I'd gone into like some unreal different dimension where logic and understanding didn't exist, because it certainly was happening to me there. So the upshot of the conversation is that Keith went away with my only 2 books about the history of Joy Division to look into this subversive occultist band, which were clearly turning me on to the dark side of the force. Needless to say, he went away, read the books, and read there was nothing really in it at all. Unfortunately, the lead singer had killed himself purely because he was having marital problems and was prescribed the wrong tablets, was depressive, and used to take epileptic fits. And like a lot of people, he killed himself. So that was it. So at that point, I think I should realise what was going to happen next. But of course, if you're in a congregation like that, where they are just thinking about the reputation of the congregation, the last thing you want to do is form a band in that congregation, because the writing was already on the wall that, Terry, whatever you do, don't form a band in this hall. It was bad in air, but this is going to be far, far worse. But I go where angels fear to tread, and that's what I did. So bizarrely, I got Stan Bailey's son, Paul Bailey, to should we form a band? He played keyboards. I got a guy called Gary McEwen, whose father John McEwen was a servant in the congregation, to play guitar, and Gordon Thompson, the pioneer, he used to be in the Pioneer Flat, who had now gone up to Pollock Shields, or wherever it was, to play the bass, play my bass. And I had my own guitar, so I played guitar, and we started then rehearsing in a community hall and in rehearsal studios every week. Gary went out, he didn't have a guitar, his dad had an acoustic, so he went out and bought a brand new guitar, Then he went out and bought a vocal PA for us because Gary had money and I didn't have money. I wasn't even bloody working at the time. I was like some poor pioneer. Thompson wasn't really working, and Bailey already had his equipment. But Gary McEwen was so up for this, and he thought it was brilliant. Now, the writing on the wall again for the band came very quickly. What we did is we did, funny enough, all our own music, so we couldn't be accused of doing worldly music. We just did the songs that I'd written for Always the Way. So let's do this song. That's what we did. We just did all my songs. So in other words, nobody could say, "Oh, you doing worldly music?" No, actually I'm doing my own music here. So what happens is we're doing that. We're playing the band, and then Gary came back to me and says, "Mum and Dad aren't very happy about me being in the band." I says, "Well, why is that?" He says, "What's it all about? What's the purpose in this all? What's the purpose in all this band business?" And he says, "Well, we're going to be a cult band." Oh dear, because the word cult is of course 2 letters off occult, yes, and that is, you know, that's what it was. When Gary said cult, his dad thought, "You mean a cult?" No, cult band. But anyway, straight away he was thinking, "Oh no, this isn't good." And then what happened next was another another nail into the coffin of Jehovah's Witnesses Music and me. Because one night, you imagine we were rehearsing this unexpected, it wasn't like pre-told this was going to happen. One night there's a knock on the door, next thing is in comes into the door, I open the door and there's John McEwen, behind him is his wife Ivy McEwen, and sheepishly in the background, who never said a word during the whole of this conversation, was Gary McEwen. You may watch this video and will remember this, or maybe try to forget this event really happened, but it did happen. So they called traipsed him, and Paul Gentini, they said, "We've come to speak to you." So we went into the lounge. Paul went into our room into his room, or my room, listening to music or studying or whatever he's doing. Next thing is I sat down and literally Ivy and John gave me both barrels. How dare I influence their son Gary to be in a band? How dare I fill his head with nonsense to get him to buy equipment? I'm thinking, and I said, but he wanted to do that, and he had the money, and he was really for this, and I had all the equipment. You know, I was giving my bass to somebody else. I don't have any money. He didn't have a guitar. He bought the guitar, then he got the vocal PA, and then we started rehearsing. He didn't need a vocal PA. So I'd influenced him. I'd influenced him to buy the instruments of the devil, to fill his head with nonsense, and he was only young, and I was older. I was, because I think Gary was maybe 19 and I was 22 at the time, so those 3 years I had a heavy influence on him. And he gave me both barrels, and I remember I said something to John, and something cheeky to John in response, and I remember John came up to me and he wanted to headbutt me. I'm thinking, what is going on? What is going on in this hall? Anyhow, so basically so basically, in a nutshell, is I'd already had the 2 elders and the ministerial servant and a pioneer tell me that my clothes, my music, my photos were all wrong. And then I had these 2 come up to my house, a servant and his wife and their son who didn't say anything, tell me that I was an evil influence on their son, and that me being in a band was worldly and I was doing it wrong. And they walked out of the room, and I was emotionally completely shattered, and I had a breakdown. I literally, because in other words, I just thought to myself at that time, I actually thought, what am I? What am I? What have I? I had to think, I'm all wrong. I just thought to myself, I am all wrong. Everything I like, people are telling me is wrong. My music, my clothes, my pictures, my aspirations to just make music, it was all wrong. And I remember there was a lamp on the somewhere near me, and I went, whoa! And I knocked this lamp and it went flying in the air. I hit the wall, and next thing, all the lights went out in the flat. They all went out. And of course, Paul all of a sudden hears the bang, comes out, and everything's gone into darkness, and he comes up to me and says, Terry, he's looking for me, he's really concerned. And I couldn't speak to him because I mentally and emotionally and spiritually completely shut down. I just completely shut down, and I wouldn't speak to him. And I couldn't speak to him. I'd so inwardly gone in myself, because trying to figure out who am I, what am I, that I'd like, you know, I'd done like a data in Star Trek, and I was just whirring through, and I was just completely stationary. So Paul panics, and he goes and walks to the nearest elder. The nearest elder to walk to is Keith Saunders. So we had the return of Keith Saunders in my life. So Keith comes up and he's, I'm sorry to hear this, Terry. I'm really angry about what happened, because obviously Paul must have realised whatever had happened was a direct result of John McEwen and Ivy McEwen, you know, giving me pelters, that I'd had this mini breakdown. And eventually, you know, he sort of taught me out of the sort of cocoon that I'd wrapped myself into. And I eventually, you know, I think it took a few days, but eventually, you know, got to being the old me. Now, I just thought to myself afterwards, you know what, I'm because he's left the band, I'm not taking this at all. And the band continued. I just thought, stuff him, stuff Gary, stuff his weird mum and dad, I'm going to carry on with the band. So the band carried on. I was a guitarist anyway. They're not stopping us in the true Flashdance style. We're carrying on the good fight. So we carried on rehearsing. We used to carry on rehearsing, just the three of us, and it was just good. Drum machine, guitar, bass, keyboard, it was good. Until the next thing is, I get another knock on the door. Oh my goodness, who's this time? It's Stan Bailey. Can I have a word with you, Terry? Yeah, I want you to end the band. Right, why is that then? Too many people are talking about it. It's going to affect my son. I think he was trying to be a servant at the time. He's in your band. I want you to end the band. It's not. You know, it could affect his appointment as a servant in the congregation. And I was like, I just threw in the towel. I says, well, the problem is, Stan, I've already booked a rehearsal and practice, and it's tomorrow, whatever it is, and we're going to get charged 20 quid. And out of his wallet came £20. He gave me the £20, and I went into Glasgow the next day and gave the guy £20 and said, that's it. I don't know how I told Gordon, because we didn't have Facebook or mobile numbers. Maybe I phoned him, can't remember. Did he have a phone? Did I write to him? Maybe I wrote to him. No, I didn't write to him, I didn't know his address. And so that was the end of... I can't even remember whether I called that band a name. It might have been... Who knows? Who cares? So anyway, this is what's happening. That's two bands have been taken down by the elders in the hall. Two bands gone. So what am I going to do in the meantime? So I just thought, stuff them, stuff a lot of you, and I still continue to write songs, Now Paul Gintini in the meantime came into a bit of money, and he bought himself a lovely music system, fantastic, but he had nothing to play on it. And he then started going into our local Woolies and trying to buy back, because he was no longer in air. He thought, right, I'll try and get back all the songs he used to have. And he started buying cassettes. So he started buying loads of cassettes of all the records he used to have. And he was really big into a band called Genesis, and the singer called Peter Gabriel, which I really liked. I've never really taken Genesis seriously, especially the Phil Collins version of the band, but the Peter Gabriel version of the band, pretty good. So the next thing is we got into that, and I'm still in the Pioneer. I'm still pioneering the Pioneer flat. I'm going to work at Marks and Spencer's. Gintini isn't working because he's disabled, and he's got money. We're listening to Genesis, and Andy Doolin every morning. He left at 6 in the morning. He got back at wherever it was, and he used to work every morning. And a Saturday morning, what Andy always used to do is he used to go to work, and then he used to go straight out with his group. He was in a different group to us for Chapping Doors, so we went out in the Tory Glen group, or whatever group he was in, and we used to go out with our one, which was based in the Kingdom Hall. One Saturday morning, anyway, me and Paul go out to do the Chapping the Doors. Andy Doolan's not back yet, he's not come in. He obviously went to work as he usually does Saturday morning, and he usually came back about 12:30 or whatever. So the next thing that happens is I'm making sandwiches, or maybe Paul buttered the sandwiches and I'm putting on the meat, heaven knows. So we've got the door open, we're playing Peter Gabriel, we're playing a Peter Gabriel song. I can't remember which one it was, it could have been Biko, who cares. So we're singing a song and me and him are singing ho ho ho, and we're singing along these songs. So I'm like in the middle of there's a long sort of galley kitchen and I'm there, you know, doing what I'm doing is. And then the next thing is, out of nowhere, I have flown 6 foot. Literally I was standing here and then the next thing is I'm now over here. I'm off camera because I've just flown 6 foot. What happened was, unbeknown to us, Andy was ill in the room next door. He didn't go to work that day, he didn't go on the work that day, and he was next door because he wasn't feeling very well. And he thought that we were singing these songs to wind him up. Andy never left a note to say, by the way lads, keep it down today, I'm not well. We thought he was out. He thought, I don't know why, because his thinking wasn't quite right, he thought we were winding him up. And we weren't winding him up. But he came into the kitchen and the first person he sees is me, because Paul's in the bedroom, Paul was laying the table in the lounge, ready for the sandwiches. Paul's doing that, or the soup. It was the soup because the soup went flying. That's right. I remember now, I was actually doing the soup. I was doing the soup. You know, won't let Paul anywhere near a pan, so I'm doing the soup and he's taking the plate soup. And the next thing is, I'm doing that and I go flying. Because what happened is, he'd come in, see me, and he'd punch me. He'd punch me straight in the side of the head. And so I went back and the soup, of course, went flying that way. And I flew 6 foot and landed against a window. With the kitchen window, and I turned round thinking, what has gone on? And Andy Doolan is that far from my face. Literally was frothing in more than the Stan Bailey style. He was froth was coming out his face, and his fist is about an inch from my face, and he just says, I will bloody stiffen you. I will bloody stiffen you. In other words, he was threatening to kill me. So of course he walks away. And then Paul Gentini walks in and he just realises something horrible's happened and he bursts into tears and he walks out the flat because I think something had happened when he was younger between his mum and his dad, I don't know. But obviously things came slowly back to him and he walked out the flat bursting into tears. And I at this moment, I've no idea what's gone on. I've no idea what's happened or why it's happened. So of course I've got to get out of the flat and I got a bus straight away up to where my girlfriend's parents lived at the time, Castlemilk. I went in and just said, and they said, why are you here on a Saturday afternoon? And Carol, my wife, was working at the time. And I said, and I told them what happened, and they were shocked because Andy Doolan was in my girlfriend's mother's group, and they said, no, that doesn't sound like this. This happened. This really happened. I've just been physically attacked. And threatened, and he threatened to kill me over something I don't know. So a little later, Andy went to see his mate Keith. Went to see Keith. Keith then went to see his mate Jim Wood, who I think at this point may have been the presiding overseer. Don't really know. So there's a chap at the door, and in come these spiritual heavyweights, Keith and Jim Wood. Now, Andy had gone to their house, into Keith's house. He'd admitted what happened. He told them that he felt provoked, and he'd admitted that he'd physically attacked me and threatened to kill me. So of course, when the elders came to see me, they obviously said to me, look, the first thing you need to do is you can't go back to the Pioneer Flat. We cannot under good heart recommend you go back to the Pioneer Flat. That may be a bit dangerous for you. Don't go back there. We think you should report the incident to the police because you've been physically assaulted and the guy's threatened to kill you, and if you do go back and it happens again, this could be really bad. So you need to go to the police. We're going to unfortunately have to remove Andy from being a ministerial servant, and we're going to have to restrict his privileges of whether he can pioneer or not. Of course, that never happened, did it? That's what should have happened. That's what should have happened. They should advise me to go to the police, they should advise me not to go to the Pioneer flat, and they should have probably removed Andy from being a servant, because clearly the guy was unstable. And to be triggered into threatening to kill somebody over somebody singing a song is just a complete overreaction. But instead, they came in and said to me, well, Terry, Andy did feel he was provoked. And I went, provoked? We didn't even know he was in the flat. So how could we provoke somebody that we thought was out chapping doors with his group? Utter, complete rubbish. Even if that Friday night Andy had said to us, oh, by the way, lads, I'm a bit under the weather, I'm not going to work, I'm not going on the doors, and so tomorrow morning, can you keep the noise down because I'm having a lie-in. If I have a lie-in, I might feel better for the meeting on the Sunday. And then we decided, and we'd forgot, or for a laugh, we said, oh, let's wind Andy up, let's sing Biko at the top of our voices. Even if we'd done that, that still didn't justify us, him punching me and threatening to kill me. It still didn't justify it. But of course the elders, I was already seen, enabled Andy, they justified his actions by obviously saying, yes Andy, we can understand you're provoked. I'm going, on a second, he was not provoked, that is rubbish. But their advice went this way. He says, what's your plans, what do you plan to do? And I said, well obviously, lads, I can't go back to that Pioneer flat. That's out of the question. I cannot go back in that environment. The guy's threatening to kill me. What's going to be the next thing that sets him off? If me not knowing he's there and singing sets him off to do that, what happens when maybe we end up in a verbal argument over something trivial, something important? What's he going to do then? I said, I'm going to probably go and live with Floyd Collins, who was a brother just up the road, he had his own room. So I'll go and live with him. And they said, well, what we must think is the congregation, its good name, and what Jehovah would want us to do. Yes, it always comes down to that. It always comes down to the good name of the congregation and what Jehovah would want us to do. That's right, because clearly when they were driving up, they got on the phone to Jehovah and said, Jehovah, what would you want? What would you want to happen in this situation? Ah, well, Keith and Jim, I suggest he goes back to the flat, doesn't ring the police, and will keep Andy on as a servant. And let's all hope that it works out. That's what their advice, clearly Jehovah's advice was to them. So the Bible came out, things to do with forgiveness and long suffering and forgiving your brother, and all sorts of misapplication to, what had happened, totally misapplied it. And then what they then said, they said, right, we'll just have a prayer. You've always got to have a prayer, and you've always got to have a prayer, because the prayer seals the deal. Because during prayer, there's going to be you, those two, and Jehovah. So there's 4 of us in the house. And what's said in that prayer, that during that time, is sacrosanct. It's oh my God, it's just like, oh, it's more holy than most holies. During that prayer, he said, well, Jehovah, we hope that Terry decides to go back to the flat and do your will. We hope Terry goes back to the flat, shows forgiveness to Andy, and does what you want to do. But and you will bless him. But if he decides not to go to the flat, we're sure that you'll be with him as well. So in other words, what they were saying was, in front of Jehovah, in prayer with Jehovah, they were saying, oh, by the way, we're all in agreement here. We're all in agreement. It's your will that he goes back to the flat, and he will be blessed if he goes back to the flat. But if he chooses not to go back to the flat, not only is he going against you, the most supreme being, Jehovah God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, but then maybe you'll bless him, maybe you'll still be with him. And that's how the meeting ended. And Andy was in the car, and he came and says, Andy would like to speak to us. I don't want to speak to him. And he came out and says, no, we think you should speak to him. So Andy came out, I'm really sorry. I'll take you out for a meal. I'm thinking, no, that's right. That makes it all right, doesn't it? Let's go out for a meal. Let's have a meal. And what should we talk about? Should we talk about the next thing that you're going to hit me for? Should we talk about that? And that's the way I was left. So in other words, I was spiritually blackmailed to go and live with this guy. And this what happened to me there, I can now understand how people who have been emotionally, physically and sexually abused, that when the elders get involved, how they don't want you to involve the police, how you've got to show forgiveness to this person, and how you have to leave everything with Jehovah, because you've got to think about the congregation. And basically he said in that talk, he says, we have to think about is what happens if this gets out in the congregation. I'm thinking, and that was the whole thing they didn't like. They knew if I moved out and moved in with Floyd, everybody in the congregation would go, oh, I hear Terry's moved out the Pioneer flat and is living with Floyd Collins. What happened there then? Oh, haven't you heard? Yeah. Andy Doolan physically attacked him and threatened to kill him. No way. Andy straight away, servant off, pioneering off. You know, that straight away. But I was told to keep it quiet for the good of the congregation and Jehovah's name. It's awful. It is truly awful that I was put into that position and given that advice by these massive elders, these district convention speaking elders, but I was put in that position. Ridiculous. And so I did. I went back to live in that flat, and I never spoke to Andy Doolan for something like 3 months. Imagine living in a small flat, me and Paul eventually returned, and I never spoke to this guy for 3 months. I used to walk past him, never spoke to him. In the kitchen, I'll go back later. That sort of thing. 3 months, because I couldn't speak to him. I thought, I can't speak to this guy. I just thought, if I can't speak to him, I can't flip in. I thought that's the best way. Don't speak to him, I'm not going to rile him up, there's not going to be trouble. Until that is, one Saturday, it was a Saturday afternoon, and I was in a different room this time, and I was playing some music, and I was playing some music, or I was putting down a guitar track or something, and the door opens. The guy knows I'm recording. You can see him recording, but he opens the door anyway. And it's something like something trivial like, "Are you on dishes this week or today?" I says, "Yeah, I am." Because we used to take rota. Your dishes, you clean the bathroom, you do the hoovering. You know, we rota Paul, Terry, Andy. Rota there. And it's my turn. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to do it. Yeah, and he went to me, "No, I want you to do it now." I says, "No, Andy, I am going to do it, but I just need to finish this off." "No, I want you to do it now." And I stood up to him and says, "Andy, this is the first conversation I've had with him for 3 months." "No, Andy, I'm not doing it. I'm literally I'll do it, but I just need to finish this." And he says, "You do it now." And he picked up the nearest thing to him and he threw it across the bedroom. And I ducked, and it battered off the window behind me. And he went out and he slammed the door. Guess what he'd picked up? Guess what was the nearest thing on hand to pick up? It could have been an Oscar. Well, it wasn't an Oscar. Or it could have been some statue, or something woodeny, or something metal, or something whatever, or something hardbound, or whatever it is. It could have hit me in the head. It could have it could have injured me. It could have killed me. We don't know. We don't really know what could have happened. In the kitchen when he attacked me, I'm glad that we never had an array of knives, because maybe the knife would have been the next thing. But of course, in this instance, the nearest thing on hand was a book. And the book that he threw at me was the Bible. Oh, the irony that he picked up the Bible and he threw it at me. Luckily it wasn't something metallic, because even if I ducked, which I did, as I saw it flying through the air towards my head, if it had been metallic it could have gone through the window, and as I've already said, we were the 3rd floor up. It could have gone through the window, broke the window, straight down, could have broken glass, could have killed somebody, injured somebody. Ramifications of that, not worth speaking about. But so in other words, you could have injured me, killed me, or injured or killed somebody else down below. You know, if it had been something heavier than the New World Translation at the time. And it wasn't even the hard version, it was the sort of floppy version. So that was it. His anger, he lost control of himself just because of the fact that at that moment I refused to do the dishes right at that moment, because I said that I will do them not now. So I thought, right, what do? I've been attacked by this guy again. I'm not going to go to Keith this time, and I'm not going to go to Stan. Waste of time. I'll go to the elder who runs our group, and his name was Eric Bland. So I went to Eric, and I said, went to Eric Bland, because the meeting was on the Sunday, and I was speaking to him in the cloakroom, you know. It's funny this, isn't it? You know, couldn't get in the wee room, and so we're speaking. So people are coming out, and I'm like trying to speak to him. I says, I told him exactly what happened. I says, I was doing this, and he threw that, and he threw the Bible at me, and hit the window, blah blah blah. And he went, oh right. So after the meeting, Andy, I need to have a word. He says, Terry said this happened. He says, yeah, that's exactly what happened. He wouldn't clean the dishes when I asked him to do, and I did pick up the Bible and I threw it at his head. And this is without a word of a lie. He says, and he said to Andy, that's not what concerns me, Andy. It doesn't concern me that you threw something at him that could have injured him, killed him, or gone through the window, injured or killed somebody else, and then gone in the papers or whatever. It's the fact that you picked up, and he held it, you picked up God's word. You picked up God's. So I'm looking and thinking, oh, so hold on a second. So we're glossing over the fact that the guy has just attacked me for the second time. What's more important here, that he's used the Bible to try and attack me with. It's the Bible. And I thought to myself, my God, this guy doesn't know that previously he threatened to kill me and punched me in the side of the head. Obviously the two elders, Keith and Jim, had not gone back to the elders and dealt with it internally like the elders like to do. So that basically the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, or do they even care? So that's what happened. So that was it. That was the sum total of of chastising Andy. He threw something at me, and because it was the Bible, that was the real crime here. The real crime was the Bible. And nothing came out of that. He never got removed from being a servant. There was no talk about it. He never got to pioneer. That was it. And yeah, so where'd you go? That's like what, third different elder about this guy. No, fourth different elder about this guy. Bizarre. So I go back because I go back to the pioneer flat because I'm still at this time. Of course, I've been told I must go back, and it's Jehovah's way. Yeah, it's great, brilliant. And I'm seeing my wife at the time, and within time what happened was that Andy met a girl, and I think his frustration was he was reaching 30. All his friends who'd been in the pioneer flat got married, and he couldn't get a girlfriend. And us two pioneers had come in the hall, and straight away we'd got girlfriends. So in other words, he was thinking he was left out. I think that's what his real problem was. I think he had an anger issue clearly, but I think he was frustrated that he was 30, and he was thinking that potentially he may not find the one. Subsequently, he did find the one, and when he started seeing this other girl, I think her name was Kathy as well, he changed and became a totally different person. And funny enough, once he started going out with this girl, I got on with him. I got on with him fine. All of a sudden, the guy was different, because all of a sudden, all this tension that he was feeling, which was taken out on me, went away. Now, sadly, he got married, and sadly, and this is ironic here. This is the irony of this. He got married. He had a child. His child, I don't know what it was, but there was something not quite right with Andy's son at the time. Maybe there was some problem like Asperger's or something like that. I don't know whether it was undiagnosed, but Andy, all of a sudden, he'd moved to a different congregation. Andy Doolan killed himself. He committed suicide and killed himself. So what a sad end. What a sad end to the story for him. That he, and I went to his funeral and I burst into tears. And I remember somebody said to me, he says, but you didn't even like him. I'm going, that's not the point. The point is it's a tragedy that he felt that he killed himself. It was a complete tragedy that happened. So, the next part in our story is, Dino, do you remember Dino? That was the drummer in Always the Way. In Air, after the meeting in the wee room, I sold his drums, and that was him out of the music. Well, he moved. He was supposed to do it in. He was supposed to move in '84 up to Rutherglen, but he never quite made the move, and probably because of what he was hearing was going on, the madness. and thought, well, you know, the grass is not always green on the other side, and better the devil you know. Devil being the appropriate word. So he stayed where he was. And what happened was, he came to my wedding in 86, I think it was. I'm sure it was 86 I got married. Oh my god, that's sad. Yeah, 86. So he came up to my wedding in 86, and he met his future wife at our wedding, a girl called Kathy. And eventually the courtship progressed, and he got married in maybe 87 or 88, can't remember when. Anyway, so he's now up, he's on with Glenn, and time went on, and we got chatted about the good old days, always away, and off the wee room, and off those heady days. And we used to play a lot of the always away tapes that we used to play. And he said, I tell you what, how about, oh, you know what's coming next, how about we form a band? Ah, okay, we'll do that. So we formed a band, you know, because, you know, lots of things had changed. I was now a servant, he was a servant, and we brought into the band a guy I brought into the truth called Gus Kelly, who became the son-in-law to Keith Saunders. He came to the band, a guy called Mark Violet, who was in his club band. He came to the band, and bizarrely, back from the dead, in almost Lazarus, you know, it was in the mode of Lazarus himself, back from the dead, Paul Bailey. That's right. Remember Stan, his dad, came up to me and said, you've got to close down the band because it's going to affect Paul's attempt to become a servant. Well, now everything was all right because Paul was a servant, so he's good to go for back in the band. So I went up to Paul. Paul, do you want to come back in the band? Yeah, okay, yeah. Nothing serious. I said, nothing serious, Paul. Let's just do this for fun. Let's just do this for fun. So we started rehearsing every Friday or whatever it was. And we did Always the Way. That's gone. We're not doing any of that. You know, that Always the Way music, it's cursed. It's cursed. We're not doing that. Let's just do our own material. Let's just think of our own material. So we started doing, you know, somebody come in and say, how about we do that song? How about we do that song? How about we do that song? So that's what we did. Different people came along, and we just became a cover band. And I was, you know, I didn't want to be in a cover band, but the good thing about it was at least you were performing with other people and having a good time. Friday night, rehearsal, cover band. I mean, we practice and practice and practice. Now, next thing that happened is that a guy called Jim Kelly, who was in Air, he came to a relationship with, bizarrely, Sharon Bland. That's the daughter of the elder who took more offence to the fact that Andy Doolan had thrown the Bible at me than the fact that Andy Doolan had tried to attack me. So that's his daughter now. She ends up with a relationship with Jim Kelly from Air, and they plan to get married. Now, normally at weddings during this time, if you went to a wedding in Glasgow, every wedding I'd been to, your musical entertainment came across through something called ceilidh dancing. Now, if you're outside Scotland, you know what ceilidh dancing is. It's also called Scottish country dancing. It's a type of folk dancing. Now, nobody really knows the origins of ceilidh dancing. Apparently, a lot of dances were done by regimental Highland soldiers and their wives. Other people said it was celebration of clans, a victory over other clans. Nobody really knows. But needless to say, it's still worldly music because neither Franz or Nor wrote the ceilidh songs. They originate in the 18th century or whatever. So they've been adapted to our modern times, and you get, you know, they've come certain standards of certain ceilidh music. So every time you went to a witness wedding, it was ceilidh dancing. And ceilidh dancing is quite a physical dancing, whereupon normally if you're dancing like to modern music, your partner's over there and you're over here and you're doing a bit of this and a bit of that, and there's not much interaction unless maybe you are somebody who knows actually how to do proper rock and roll dancing, where you get your partner, well, it sounds a bit odd this, but you know, you get my drift. But ceilidh dancing is something different, whereupon you walk on, you're holding hands. Sometimes you even hold hands with blokes. You know, if it doesn't work out, girl boy, you do end up holding hands with a bloke. Never mind, but usually it's quite physical. You get your partner, you do a lot of dancing with them like this, and then you twist round, then all of a sudden you look down and, hey presto, I've got a brand new partner that I'm putting my arm around, and I'm doing this. You know, there's lots of physical interplay, a lot of physical connection between, by people who aren't husband or wife, for instance. Oh my god. So anyway, that's ceilidh dancing. So let's go back to Jim. Jim and Sharon are getting married, and they're getting married, and Jim, who's our friend from Air, of course, he says, I would like you, the band, because he heard that we were, the band, that there was a band playing music, I'd like you to play at the wedding. Now normally, quite often happen at witness weddings, that during the intermission, one guy would go up and do a song, you know, do one Beatles song. You know, with just a bit of entertainment while you're eating your sausage rolls and your coronation chicken sandwiches. We're going to have one guy doing a song. So quite often that was me or Ian Gill, you know, or both of us together, as it wasn't at my wedding. But this is something different. This is, we do the ceilidh dancing. We have the intermission, and then, oh my goodness, a proper band with drums and all that newfangled stuff, PA, you know, you name this. And we went up, as a whole load came up from the congregation Air who we knew. We came up, there's people from the Glen, and all of a sudden, for the first time ever in probably in the history of the witnesses in Glasgow, is that people dance to modern music. When I say modern, it wasn't really modern. You know, we were doing Johnny B. Good. When was that? 1958. It wasn't really modern. And we did Beatles songs. We did Summer of '69, Addicted to Love, Erasures, A Little Respect. You know, stuff like that. You know, Paul Weller song, a few slow songs, Stand By Me. You get the drift. Typical wedding fare. You know, nobody in their right mind could possibly be offended by what we did. If only that was true. But anyway, so everybody had a great time, and there was a video guy videoing the whole event, all brothers and sisters getting all, you know, they're a bit tentative at first. It's a bit like Flashdance or, you know, or any of those films where, you know, all of a sudden one person goes up, and next thing is everybody was up. The whole floor was filled with people dancing and enjoying themselves. And dancing as a, you know, small group or one or two is fantastic. And of course, if you're a band and you're playing on stage and you see everybody enjoying your music, you know, it brings a warmth to your heart, and you really enjoyed it. And we had a fantastic night. And then the wedding concluded, and everybody went away. What a great wedding that was! That the band was great. The next you know, obviously the next wedding was going to do. We were going to play again. We thought, this is great. We're going to get used. Loads of other witness weddings, and hopefully we'll even get paid for doing this, because we did it for Jim and Sharon for free. We even hired the PA for free, you know, everything we did for free. And we thought that'd be it. We saw a future with the band and doing witness weddings. We thought there's nobody else that does this. How wrong were we? Because the next thing that happened is, on the video you can actually see a certain brother standing just inside the hall where everybody's dancing. Now his arms are folded, and he's looking at this scene of Sodom and Gomorrah. In front of him, these sisters dancing suggestively. He don't like it. Now this brother's name was Brian Lowe. Now originally he came into our hall because he was dating a guy called Anita, can't remember a maiden name. And when he came in, he seemed quite an alright dude. He used to moan to us about the elders, and you know, we need to sort these guys out. He wasn't happy with things in Rutherglen. He thought there needed to be a changing of the guard, and he was going to be the man for it. And I remember when he eventually became an elder, and he got into being an elder, and I thought to myself, this is it. I actually said to him these words, it's great, we've finally got a man on the inside. Because of all of my bad experiences with the elders in Rutherglen, I just thought, finally we've got a guy in here that we can trust, that is going to change the way things have been going. Well, how wrong was I? Because before even the marriage had time to be consummated, he was already stirring things up. And I got to hear this from the brother of the bride. Paul Bland said to me, he couldn't believe it, because Brian had gone round saying that the wedding was ridiculous, that brothers were dancing and sisters dancing suggestively, that the music was worldly, that there was a spirit of the world in the wedding. He wasn't happy. He wanted he wanted heads to roll. Of course, one of the heads obviously would be mine, because I'm in the band. And Paul Bland said to me at the time, I feel like just going up to the elders and in protest at this guy's ridiculous overreaction, this self-righteous, this super-fan apostle's overreaction to this. He wanted to resign as being a servant. He felt that bad about it. Needless to say, he didn't resign as being a servant, and the sort of murmurings carried on for a while until, you know, it petered out. Now, the next wedding that came up was a guy called Scott Cameron, who was marrying a sister in Stranraer called Miriam McCubbin. And they were getting married, and we did the same thing. We says, I tell you what, we'll do it. We'll do Kaylee dancing first, and the band will come on. Great time last time. It'd be fantastic. And it was horrible. It was really, really horrible, because what happened is everybody from Rutherglen who was there, and not many came from Stranraer because it was blinking miles away, and it was only a small hall. Everybody that was from Rutherglen wouldn't dance. The youngsters wouldn't dance because of the bad feeling that Brian Lowe had caused at the previous wedding, that they didn't want to go up and be judged. They didn't want to go up and enjoy it, and seem to be enjoying themselves dancing to this worldly music. And it was horrible. And I remember going up to one of the brothers, a guy called Simon Harrison, who was the son of an elder, who you danced at the previous wedding. He says, I don't know what happened, either you walked past, and I says, why are you not dancing? And he says, I can't. And that's what happened. Somehow, the word has spread, subliminally or whatever, or through the elders, that once the band came on, that it wasn't appropriate to dance with us, even though we were doing exactly the same material and it was the same band. And the wedding was a disaster. When you're at a wedding and the band's playing and nobody's dancing, and we played for about an hour with nobody dancing, it wasn't nice. And I felt really sad that I was to blame for ruining Scott's wedding. I felt terrible, and I thought, this isn't nice. I said, right, well, we're not doing any more. After that night, I said to the rest of them, we can't do any more weddings with Rutherglen. I says, this guy, Brian Lowe, has ruined this. He's ruined this completely. And the band continued on. We wouldn't do any witness weddings. The band continued on. We wouldn't do any witness weddings at all. And we were thinking about progressing now to just playing pubs. The personnel changed in the band. The personnel changed, and Paul Bailey went, and Mark Violet went, and we got a couple of other guys came in. We got Dino went. He got fed up. He left as well. Got another drummer in, but we continued on playing. Now, what had happened this time is that I got a shepherding call, and yet again, I've said this before, if you should get a shepherding call, you should have an independent witness, excuse the pun, with you, just because if somebody really goes over the top, that you've got a witness to how somebody abusive some of these elders can be. So I got a shepherding call by, unbelievably, Brian Lowe, because unbelievably I ended up being in his group. I've forgotten how this happened I'm confused, but anyway, I ended up in his group. So I'm in his group, he's the elder, I'm the servant, and so next thing he comes to give me a shepherding call. Now, I was recently brought to recall this event, because when he left I wrote down certain things that he said, because I couldn't believe it. And I recently found that bit of paper only about a month ago in amongst a whole load of other junk I had in this old suitcase, and I thought, what's this? And it brought it all back, and I felt so angry. But anyway, this is the crux of what happened. He comes into me and says, right, you're still performing this band, you're still playing this band? Yes, I do. Right, so what's your intentions? I says, well, hopefully we'll just get good and, play some pubs or whatever. Well, why would you want to do that? Well, because we enjoy doing it. We enjoy a Monday night playing. Well, yeah, but it's worldly music. Yes, I know it's worldly music, Brian. But obviously, even when I've been playing my own music, it was still worldly music, bizarre. And I was a servant at the time, and he says, how do you pray at night? I'm going, what do you mean? Well, when you come home, he says, I find it very difficult that when you come home on a Friday, he says, do you pray with your wife? I say, well, yes, I do pray with my wife, I do pray with her. He says, I don't know how you, in good conscience, can pray to Jehovah with your wife after you've been to a band rehearsal. And I said, why? He says, well, and basically this is where the angle was. He was wanting to get me removed from being a servant for being in this band, because he says there could be an accusation made against me because I, on a Friday night with other brothers, performed music, and he didn't like it. And I says, look, Brian, we're very careful about the material that we choose, that we don't, that nobody can find offence in it. And he said, well, if that's the case, if you've chosen that, I can only question your judgment of what you think is appropriate for a Jehovah's Witness to like and play. So in other words, what he was saying, that that we didn't have a conscience which could, ensure that we wouldn't play anything by Megadeth or anything to do with gang culture or whatever it is. I'm just exaggerating there, but you get the point. So that's what it was. He was saying there was an accusation that could be made, so I could be removed as a servant, and he wasn't happy that I was a servant and still playing in this band. And he was just basically saying, you need to close down the band, stop the band again. Now, what I should have done, I should have said to him, Brian, you know what, there's the door, off you pop. Because if anybody else had come in here, anybody else off the street had come in to me and say, you see your band, you need to stop it because because it's all wrong, I would have said, you don't know what you're talking about, you need to leave now. Unfortunately, because he was an elder, and he was there, as he said so many times, representing the congregation and Jehovah, and this is what Jehovah says. It's bizarre, isn't it? It's what Jehovah says. No, it's not, Brian. It's what you're saying. You're trying to micromanage my life based on what you like and what you don't like. But you're coming into my house, not the Kingdom Hall. I've invited you in. Well, sorry, you invited yourself in. You're just coming in and to flipping, just have a go at me again. You know what? I've had enough of this. So he went out. He went out of my house, and I wish I could say. I just told him to swear in, but of course he didn't, because he's an elder. I wish I had. I wish it says, Brian. But I didn't do that. And he went, and I wish I could say right now that was the end, because we're sort of drawing to the end of my being a witness. I wish I could say that was the last time that there was a problem. There's a clash between Jehovah's Witnesses music and me, but it wasn't. Now, we then as the band continued to play, we did do other weddings and engagements, not in Rutherglen, because we said we're never doing that again. And we used to do weddings and engagements in East Kilbride and other places. Really good night. We managed to finally bump out all the Ceilidh music, so from the off, we played the opening wedding song for the couple. We'd learn the song, what song you want to do, then we'd learn it, and we'd play the whole thing. We did it, and we got paid a bit of money, not a lot of money, but just enough that it paid for some drinks, and it paid for everything, whatever. And we also played a few pubs where locked-in witnesses came along to watch us. They were mostly our audience, and we had a really good night. Now I moved up to East Kilbride at this point, and I'm starting to fade away at this point, and the band got asked to play a wedding. The wedding was for the daughter of a guy called Robert Allen. Now, Robert Allen, I believe, was the presiding overseer in the congregation in Motherwell. Oh my God, this was the final straw. So basically, we'd requested the hire of a PA. Now the PA, if you don't know what PA is, it's what the vocals come out with. So of course we've paid for the guy to, because we don't own our own PA, we have to get a guy to bring it in a van, and he says, when will you be back, lads? When did you finish? He says, come back round about 11:30, because the wedding was going on about 11. Come about then. By the time we've talked to people, loaded our stuff up, you're good to go. So we went in, and I looked at the audience, and I just thought, oh my God, this isn't good. I don't know what it was. I just had a feeling that there was something really not right here. So we set up the drums and the keyboards, the two guitarists, the two vocals, and I put my bass amp on the stage. Well, it wasn't the stage, but behind the things. And I looked out, and I just thought, for some reason, I just had the feeling this is going to be horrible. And I never got on the stage. We all had the set list of what we were going to play. And I stood behind there, and I played the bass. And I never stood up. I just played the bass during all of our songs next to the video camera as I videoed this train wreck as this happened. So no karaoke music. I don't think we did any of that. We might have, sorry, not karaoke, I mean Ceilidh music. We might have done a bit of it beforehand. I can't really remember. And everybody danced the Ceilidh music. And these are the Motherwell lots. They've never seen, you know, oh, modern music, oh my goodness, a guitar, you know, oh my god, oh, a drum. And of course, if you've got a drummer, you have to play above the drums. And the way the PA was set up, there were a few old ears quite near the vocal. The drums weren't going through the vocals, but you get the drift. So the guy, Robert Allen, comes marching along the whole of the dance area, straight in front of the band. He's just going, turn it down, turn it down. And I've got this on video. So he walks away, you know, his face is fuming, so he's going away. So like everybody's turned us down. How do you turn down the drummer? So we're turning it down. Then he comes again. Turn it down. So this is the second time we've had the warning to turn down, and we're looking at each other. I'm looking at them, and they're looking at me. And they were thinking, oh my god. And then we started to look at this. We started talking on the stage, thinking, right, we're going to not do this song. We better not do this song, because they were fast songs. And we were just trying to end this as close as possible. So we started playing another song. And he comes up and he just says, you turn it down or that's it. In other words, he was saying the wedding ends now. And I just thought, oh, just get me out of here. Please, just take me away from here. Take me away. Why am I even doing this? This isn't fun. This isn't fun. This is nice. This is another, in other words, this is another wedding which I've been part of because of the music them playing is ruining the wedding. And the set list was you know, scaled right down, and at 10 o'clock the wedding was over. I think the reception lasted 2.5 hours. 7:30 till 10 it was finished. And all the equipment went back in the park, and of course we had to wait outside till 11:30, or somebody did. Oh no, I think a few of us did, to help the guy with the PA to get it back in the van, because he wasn't due back till 11:30. And it was awful. And his daughter even came out, Robert's other daughter, who was already married, can't remember this girl's name, and she says, oh, my dad's murderer, isn't he? I'm going, yeah, he is, and he reminds me of somebody in Rutherglen called Brian Lowe. Yes, he's murdered. It's somebody else who's taken offence to modern music, doesn't like it, it's worldly, blah, 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 blah. It debases, it's debased the whole night. What does debase mean anyway? Yeah. Anyway, so yes, that was it. Finally, we decided, you know what? We're never, ever, 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 ever going to play another Witness event again. And we didn't. Now, I then fell away from the Witnesses, and I told the band, I'm leaving. And even, I wasn't happy being in a cover band, and even if I'd stayed, I wouldn't have been able to play with these guys because they were all Witnesses, and I couldn't, you know, they wouldn't associate with me because I chucked it, and I left. And I then joined a worldly band. Yes, well, it wasn't really worldly because the two people I joined, well, I joined a band where two members used to be Witnesses, used to go. Younger than me, well younger than me, and we started doing original material, playing in front of a young crowd. We played various gigs in East Kilbride in Glasgow, and it was great. I think, yeah, this is what it's about. This is what it's like, playing your own material to young, appreciative audience. It's fantastic. Until we were doing it one particular gig, and it went spectacularly horrible. And I said to this guitarist called Nicky Riley, who was funny of the younger stepbrother of the guitarist in the previous band, and he said, I'm quitting the band. So that was it. He quit the band, and I moved right out, ran at exactly the same time to a rural area, an hour and a half away from Glasgow in East Kilbride, and that was it. No more band. There was no chance of me being in a band because, you know, I'm surrounded by sheep and cows, and, you know, there's no chance of being in a band in here. So that was the end. That was the end of my involvement in a band. And I was left, I had all this equipment, no band to play in. And I just thought that is the end of my involvement in music. And lo and behold, through the magical miracle of social media, both me and Ian and Dino, remember Dino, the wee guy from Always the Way, you know, and from our cover band, we got back together again. And we said, how about we reform Always the Way? 21 years, this must have been 85, sorry, 85. So we formed in 84, so what does that make? 2000 and... I don't know, I'm confused. Anyway, you get the drift. At 21 into 1985, I think it's 2006. So we decided to reform. And we got into a studio in Glasgow. I travelled up to Glasgow and rehearsed every week, every 2 weeks, and started doing the material that we used to do 21 years earlier. Unbelievable. It's probably the biggest, it's the biggest reunion of all time for a band who nobody knew of. And we got back to it again. Now, unfortunately, over subsequent years, we went through many highs. We played a lot of places. We played King Tut's. Always wanted to play King Tut's. We played King Tut's. We played the ABC. We played lots of places in Glasgow. But due to unfortunate problems, Dino left the band once, rejoined, and left the band again. Now, subsequently, me and Ian are still in Always the Way. We've been augmented now by a guy called Peter who plays keyboards and guitars, and a girl called Michelle. Now they're who does vocals and does keyboards as well and guitar. And like me and Ian, they are songwriters. And we rehearse every couple of weeks now. We've also played gigs with just a drum machine because Dino's gone. We haven't got a drummer. So if there's anybody out there who wants to join the band as a drummer, give me a call. So anyway, or leave me a message, I should say, because my number's not up, obviously. And we still rehearse. In fact, we're rehearsing tonight. I'm going to drive up to Glasgow tonight between 9 and 12. We do our own stuff. We do the material that was written way back in 1981, 82, 83 material. Then some of the material we're doing is like, you know, it's over 30 years old now. Way over 30 years. Oh, hold on a second. I'm just going to take this call. Right, so that's what I was saying. So in other words, you know, we still practice, we do these songs, and we write a lot of songs. And of course, because of my experiences, which you now all are aware of, if you manage to last this long through this video, you're aware that when I'm writing new material these days, of course, a lot of the experiences I had as being a Jehovah's Witness are in a lot of the lyrics. Especially the thin veil for one of them. I could go on. In fact, even Ian, Ian Gill should be the person who should do a story of what happened with experience with elders, because mine was bad, but his was bad as well. And he wrote a concept album of things that happened to him when he was with the Witnesses. We don't particularly do any of those songs, maybe one or two, but not that many. We're trying to move on. So anyway, that's it. The funny thing is that with Always the Way, is that the other two members of the band aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. So when me and Ian, while we're getting our gear together or afterwards talking about it, and we talk about things that we've heard through the Witnesses, they don't get. They don't get it, they don't understand it. And I'm so glad that me and Ian can talk about things. We're saying, have you heard this? Have you heard that? So at least we don't feel as though we're out on a limb like we obviously did when we were alone and bereft and without a friend in the witness world. So that's my story of Jehovah's Witnesses, music and me. As you can see, it's not a very nice story, and I probably think it's unique, but the things that happened during this just sum up the way Jehovah's Witnesses are, the way they deal with these things, where it's all about the reputation of the congregation, it's all what Jehovah wants, and the way they micromanage your whole life based on, it's not even scripturally based, where they twist things, and where ultimately it can lead, you know, to people suffering for years. And for me to be able to tell these stories, it's cathartic for me to say this, because, you know, like I said, nobody else would understand this. They wouldn't understand this. It's only if you're a witness that you could understand the way this is being done. Oh, there's the phone in. Hold on. Right, back again. So, you know, it has been a help for me to do this. It's something I've wanted to get off my chest since 84. So it's been a long time coming. It's been a long time for me to express how I felt. And maybe some of you out there who have managed to survive the whole of this tale without turning off because you got bored out your tits. If you've gone through something like this, I totally sympathise with you. And if you're a witness who's still in there and being dealt with in the manner that I was dealt with, all I can say is for God's sake, leave that organisation, because it isn't the truth. And I just want to leave you with the lyrics to a song I've written, which you'll find on this YouTube channel called Heaven. And it's referring to how many, not just Jehovah's Witnesses, how many people who are more interested in the afterlife or the possibility with the resurrection, instead of dealing with what they've got now. Because, boys and girls, what you've got now is all you'll ever get, and there isn't anything else, so make the most of it. So the chorus to this song called Heaven, which you'll find on the video, goes like this. Don't waste your life. It's all you've got. No guarantees, but there's a God. For heaven knows, for heaven's sake, this life you have is yours to make. So, anyway, if you've managed to last this long, well done. And I hope this story is, I don't know, leave a comment. You know what to do. But thanks for watching. And see you in the next video. Bye bye.